Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the next installment of this week's Babylonian Talmud Tractate Berakhot analysis and reading. So today we're going to be starting not right from the beginning here, not right from the Mishnah. You can go back and review the previous videos where we have gone through the Mishnah and then through the Gemara commentary. We're actually going to start at the end of this page right here at the Master Said to kind of give us a running start into what we talked about a little bit last time, where from here on we have the two stamaim, the two anonymous voices from the Stamidic period of 400 600 CE in argument with one another. We have the stamaim pitted against each other. So I want to start again with this paragraph and work forward. So let's go ahead and start reading, and then we'll see how things go. The master said, and this the master being the Tana from the Mishnah, the master said, from the time that the priests enter to eat the terumah. Again, this is going back to this Mishnaic statement. So this is supposedly the time at which the evening Shema can begin to be recited, from the time that the priests enter to eat their terumah. Now we have two questions that arise. The first question, when do priests eat terumah? This is a question of just additional information. What else can we learn? And we learn that the priests eat terumah from the time of the appearance of the star. So now we have this fun kind of extra additional information about an older institution that no longer exists that we wouldn't have otherwise. But then we end up having kind of an interrogation of the Mishnah style. We've seen this before when we have an introduction that the Stam gives that says, let him then say, let the Mishnaic author, let the Tana then say. We learn that that's an interrogation into the Mishnah style. And so the Stam asks, why didn't the Mishnah just say that the priests that the evening Shema can begin to be recited at the time of the appearance of the stars? Why did he go on about the priests? And we learned, first of all, that we are supposed to just kind of learn in passing that the priests eat truma from the appearance of the stars. It's kind of just a fun side note to have. We also learn, second, that the expiatory offering is not indispensable. That is, the expiatory offering is dispensable in order for the priests to eat truma. Now, I want to pause there before we kind of get into that argumentation, because that is really what's going to consume most of our time today, and want to clarify something that we talked about last time, the term srichuta, an Aramaic term talking about the necessity of every single word and phrase in the Mishnah, at least according to the author of the Gemara, at least according here to the Stam. The Stam sees every single word and phrase in the Mishnah as significant and placed there for a reason. That's why the Stam can interrogate the Mishnah's language and then say, well, this is why the Mishnah chose to say this, and this is what he's trying to get across with it. So in the Stam's mind, the Mishnah talks about the priest eating truma as the time of the evening Shema, and doesn't say the simpler thing, which is that the stars appear when the priests eat truma, because he wants to teach us, first of all, that the priests eat truma when the stars appear, and he also wants to teach us that the priests don't need to do this expiatory offering to eat truma. Now, we then said, well, what in the world in the Mishnah's reasoning leads us to that conclusion? And we learned kind of that there is absence of evidence here in the Mishnah. The Mishnah never talks about the priests having to do an expiatory offering in order to eat truma. And for the author of author of the Gemara, the Stam, that absence of evidence is evidence of absence for him, that the Mishnaic author must have meant the priest didn't need to do truma in order to eat truma. Again, that argumentation might seem strange to us. That doesn't really matter. Right now, we're really concerned with what the Stam is getting from the Mishnah. So the Stam's interpretation of the Mishnah is that thanks to the Mishnah's lack of mentioning the expiatory offering to eat truma, it must not be needed. Well, thankfully, we have another Stam who comes in and kind of voices some of our concerns, and he asks the next Stam this. He says, okay, Mr. Stam 1, how do you know that these words... Actually, before I jump there, we need to go back and talk about this baraita. We did introduce it last time, but we didn't get all the way through it. So let me quickly just jump back. So we learned that the Stam sees the Mishnah as talking about the priest eating their truma because he wants to teach us that he doesn't need to have the expiatory offering in order to eat terumah. And so to then kind of support his own interpretation of the Mishnah, he cites this baraita. And this baraita is from, as we look down here in this footnote, it's from the Sifra, which is a rabbinic midrashic commentary, just a rabbinic commentary in the Bible on the book of Leviticus. And so, first of all, it starts with these few words here, which are actually from Leviticus 22:7. And when the sun sets, vetaher. Okay, so that's the part from the Bible, and now we're going to see what the rabbinic commentary is. The setting of the sun is indispensable to eat truma. That is, in order to eat truma, the priest must have, the sun must have set. But, and the Stam is really going to like this here, the expiatory offering is dispensable to enable him to eat truma. So according to this Tannaitic teaching, this non-Mishnaic Tannaitic teaching, this baraita found in the Sifra, we learn that the Stam's interpretation of the Mishnah is quite justified here. But now we're going to get into Stam 2, starting with but, who is not quite convinced that the Mishnah, that the Stam is right about his interpretation of this verse in Leviticus. And so he asks, okay, Mr. Stam 1, how do you know that the words "and the sun sets," uva ha-shemesh, mean the setting of the sun, and this word vetaher, means that the day clears away, i.e., the day makes the man clean. That's really what he's saying here. This is just kind of the English translation selected here. And this second Stam says, well, how about instead of interpreting this, which he's attributing in Stam 1, instead of saying that and the sun sets, uva ha-shemesh, and vetaher mean these things, what about if it means, and when the sun of the next morning appears, that is, it's the new day, that's uva ha-shemesh. Literally, uva ha-shemesh in Leviticus 22:7 just means, and the coming of the sun, the sun came. And we have a problem there because the word ba, it's from beit vav aleph, it's a hollow verb. It means to come. And with the sun, it can often mean kind of a setting of the sun as well, or sometimes rising. So there's debate here. We kind of have a little bit of ambiguity in the wording. So the second Stam says, well, what if the phrase uva ha-shemesh means the sun of the next morning appears, i.e., it's a new day, and vetaher means that the man becomes clean by means of the next day having arrived. So that's where Stam 2 is now sitting. So we're going to have to think more about this. So at this point, we're now going to have to actually go through a little bit of Hebrew grammar in order to understand where the Stams are sitting. So again, we're working with this portion right here and then onto this page as well. So the first thing to understand is that the actual verse in Leviticus 22:7, for those who know Hebrew, I will just read it out. It says, "Uva ha-shemesh vetaher, ve'achar yochal min hakadashim ki lachmohu." So literally, and at the setting of the sun, then he will be clean, and after that he will eat from the holy portions, from the sacred offerings, from the terumah, because that is his portion. So what we see here is that with vetaher, it is a PL verb. That is the pointing. If you look up Leviticus 22:7, it's a PL verb. And if we were to distinguish between a PL verb and a call verb or a pa'al verb, we would note that they are both active. They are both sharing kind of active verbs. They're not passive, right? The subject is doing the action in the active voice. They're both active verbs, but call can often have a non-transitive sense in that it can have a subject and an intransitive verb. Okay, like an intransitive verb, you could kind of leave it at something like I the subject, through, right? Through what? You don't necessarily need to know that to complete the action of the verb, right? Like I threw is a completely fine sentence. In that case, through is an intransitive verb. But once I add an object, I threw a ball, Bal becomes the direct object of that verb through, and now through is a transitive verb. Well, in Hebrew, one way to communicate when we're kind of adding in a direct object versus when we're not, it was to change what we call the binyan, to change kind of, we're working with the same verbal root, but to change its meaning by putting it in, well, a different verbal kind of class, different verbal stem. So while call can have the active sense, of course, but it can also often have, it has an active sense. While it can have a transitive sense, of course, it often has an intransitive sense too. PL is really that active voice verb with a transitive sense. So this verb here is supposed to have a transitive sense, as in taking a direct object. And so the first Stam is saying that uva ha-shemesh, when the sun sets, and he is then taking, he is supplying that as kind of the subject of Veitaher. When the sun sets, the result of the sun setting causes or makes the man clean, makes clean the man. He is supplying ish, man, as his direct object. So the Stam 1's understanding of Veitaher is that the setting of the sun, uva ha-shemesh, when the sun sets and the stars appear in the sky, that makes clean the man. He is really bringing out that transitive sense of the PL verb, but even supplying a direct object in the man. But we see that with the Stam 2 interpretation down here, he actually does something different with this verb. He takes it as a passive verb. And he says that, well, when the sun of the next morning appears, i.e., when there's a new day, Veitaher must mean that the man becomes clean. The man becomes clean. By means of what? By means of the sun of the next morning arising, by means of there being a new day. But notice the way that I'm saying that the man becomes clean by. That is a classic passive construction. And this is something we're going to get into in a moment. If the second Stam really wants to make that argument, the first Stam would say, hey, Stam 2, you actually need to have a different verb form in order to convey that passive sense. So both of them are trying to look at the unsupplied subject in Leviticus 22:7. What is the subject of Veitaher? And what is the object as well? And that's what they're kind of debating. Uva ha-shemesh Veitaher. And when the sun sets, or maybe it's when the sun of the next morning comes, right? Ba has multiple senses. Veitaher. Okay. Is it the man becomes clean? Is it the day makes clean the man, Stam 1, the man becomes clean, Stam 2? We're gonna have to figure out a little bit here. But we do know that there's a little bit of a problem because we're working with the PL verb, and PL, its transitive, wants to take a direct object, and for the Stam 2 interpretation to work, he doesn't have a direct object right now. The man becomes clean. Becomes clean. That's the verbal idea, right? In English, we're just using two words to kind of get across that verbal idea. Becomes clean by means of something. So he is using a passive construction which does not have a direct object. And so we have a problem. Where is the PL direct object for Stam's 2 interpretation? So we're going to have to, again, consider where Stam 2 can really fit in with how this verb currently sits in Leviticus 22:7, Veitaher, PL verb. So we're going to now get into it here, and we're going to see that the Stam is going to invoke a named rabbi from the Amoraic period, from the period preceding the Stamitic period. The Amoraic period is the period in which the Jerusalem Talmud, the Yerushalmi, was created, and that's from 200 to 400 CE. And we're going to see that this Rabbah, son of Shelah, is brought in because he's an Amoraic voice that Stam 1 invokes to support the side of Stam 1. And he says exactly what I've kind of already been hinting at. He says, in the case that Stam 2 were correct, that Veitaher really meant that the man becomes clean when the next morning arrives, well, the text would have to read something different. The text would actually have to have a different word, which would be Vaitaher. It would actually have to have a nifal verb. It would have to have a verb that would convey the idea of the passive voice and there not being a direct object. The man becomes clean is literally what vayitaher would mean, but that's not what's actually in the text. And so Rabbi son of Sheila then says, what is the meaning of vayitaher? This PL verb, which means we're looking for a direct object, as PL has this transitive sense. And he says that the meaning actually of vayitaher is that the day clears away. In other words, the day makes clean the man. That is, when the sun sets and the day is coming to its close and we see the stars in the sky, that is what results in the man becoming clean. We also learn that this is actually what fits with a common expression at this time, which is that the sun has set and the day has cleared away. In other words, the sun coming down to set, that is what makes someone clean. And so we're actually now kind of moving into the realm of kind of common cultural evidence, right? So we often will see biblical sources invoked, Tanaitic sources are also good, but it's somewhat less common that we see a common expression in the culture invoked. But that is something that we see here. Really interesting. Now, I want to note that we have kind of gotten to put aside, up to this point, we've gotten to put aside Stam 2's interpretation and say that he's not right with his interpretation of Veta here. He has ultimately interpreted it in the wrong binyan. He's tried to make it a passive verb. He doesn't have a direct object. Stam 1 is certainly seeming much stronger at this point. But we have a problem because the evidence for Stam 1's position, right? So it's Stam 1's argument up here, then Stam 2 kind of has his retort, and then Rabba son of Sheila comes in with all of this, including his common expression. Okay, and he kind of sides with Stam 1 and says, okay, I'm going to put them out of rest. Stam 1 has the right interpretation of Veta here. He is correct. He understands the situation as the day makes clean the man. He is supplying ish as the direct object, and he's correct. But we have this issue where this explanation of Rava, son of Sheila, was unknown in the West. Okay, before going on, let's think about what the West actually is. So, out in Babylonia, or Babylonia, which is modern day Iraq, which is where the Babylonian Talmud was being written, that's in the East. What is west of Babylonia? And you think about it, and Eretz Yisrael is west of Babylonia, of Babylon, of modern day Iraq. And so we have this problem where, okay, Rabbah, son of Sheila, has this really great explanation that kind of puts to rest all the Stam 1, or puts to rest the Stam 2 kind of argument that tries to kind of break down Stam 1's argument. And he basically says, Stam 2, you're wrong. But that explanation is not known in Eretz Yisrael. And so for the rest of people out there in Eretz Yisrael, without Rabbah son of Sheila, we're stuck not really knowing who's right. Is it Stam 1 or Stam 2? Stam 2 might be correct. Take out this entire section here with Rabbah, and the ending portion is Stam 2's interpretation, right? So Stam 2 is currently the dominant voice if you remove everything here in blue. We need another way to defeat Stam 2. And so the last portion of this paragraph right here is a different way to defeat Stam 2 if Rabbah is no longer invoked. And so that's what we're going to get into now. We're going to ask the question of, well, what in the world if what happens if Stam 2's interpretation is actually correct if we don't have this additional information from Rabbah? And that's where we're going to, again, supply extra information from another source. So we find that this explanation of Rabbah, son of Sheila, was unknown in the West. Okay, so that's a little bit of an issue. And they raise this question, they being the people who are siding with Stam 2. And they're going to basically just restate Stam 1's position, and then they're going to restate Stam 2's position. And so they say This uva ha-shemesh, this and the sun sets, is how this author is translating it. Does it mean the real setting of the sun? Does it mean that the sun goes down for the night and then you see the appearance of stars in the sky? And then also, does Vetaher mean that the day makes clean the man? Remember, that's all Stam 1. Or maybe is Stam 2 still correct? Does it mean that the appearance of the sun in the sky on a new day? Is that what uva ha-shemesh means? And maybe Vataher means that the man becomes clean, which again is a passive construction. So with Stam 2's position back on the table, we now are going to work toward a resolution. We read the following, that they solved it from a baraita, they being probably the Stam 1 or kind of the group of Stam 1. They solved it from a baraita. Again, a baraita is a Tannaitic extra Mishnaic source. Could be something like from the Sifra that we saw earlier from Midrash. It could be from Tosefta. It could be somewhere else. It could be even something that we call a false baraita, where it's meant to look like it's from the Tannaitic period and invoked as a baraita, but it's really much newer. Anyways, the Stamim are going to solve this issue of who's right, Stam 1 or Stam 2. And again, we're pretending that this whole thing from Rabbah son of Sheila does no longer exist, right? We're pretending that, okay, what about the people who don't know Rabbah son of Sheila's explanation? Now we're in that lane where we're back to square one of who's right, Stam 1 or Stam 2, and we have to have an alternate solution for the people in Eretz Yisrael who don't know Rabbah son of Sheila. Well, the Stamaim are able to now solve it from a baraita, where in this baraita it said that the sign of the thing is the priest eating truma. The sign of the priest eating truma is the appearance of the stars. Hence, you learn from this baraita that it is the setting of the sun which makes the man clean. Okay, so the setting of the sun, uva ha-shemesh, makes clean the man, Stam 1. And the meaning of Vetaher is the clearing away of the day, that the day coming to its close and the stars going in the sky is what makes the man clean. We know that uva ha-shemesh must be the sun setting, i.e., Stam 1's position, because the baraita says here that the priests eat terumah when the stars appear. And for the stars to be appearing in the sky, it's necessary that that's happening in the evening, right? So we're not talking about the next morning coming, the next morning appearing like Stam 2 wanted to say, uva ha-shemesh means. We're literally talking about evening and the sun setting. And we know that because if the stars are appearing, we're talking about evening. We have to be talking about the real setting of the sun in the evening, not the rising of the sun in the next morning, but the setting of the sun at night, because the priest ate truma. We already know, we already all agree that the priest ate truma when the stars appeared in the sky, and that is something that happens in the evening. So the baraita is really the solution, because the baraita says that, well, the priests eat truma when the stars appear. Uva ha-shemesh must mean that the stars are appearing in the evening, because that's when the priests ate truma, in the evening. And so we can't say that uva ha-shemesh means the rising of the sun in the morning, and the rising of the sun in the morning is as it's talked about Stam 2's position, mean the appearance of the sun, right? Uva ha-shemesh for Stam 2, the appearance of the sun the next day. That can't be right. Rather, uva ha-shemesh must be the sun setting, and so it's the setting of the sun which gives the cleanliness to the person. And Vetaher is referring to the day making clean the man. So the day is the subject of Vetaher, not the man. The day makes clean the man. So this invocation of the baraita really does everything here. We know that the sun sets, then the stars appear, then the priests eat truma. That's all in a nice line. And this baraita again admits that the priests eat truma at the time of the appearance of the stars. The stars can only appear in the evening. So therefore, uva ha-shemesh must be talking about something happening in the evening. So Stam 1's position is now substantiated. The end of the day, the uva ha-shemesh, the setting of the sun, makes clean the man. And we know this because the priest eat truma when the stars set. That is the ha-shemesh. That is the moment that the sun is setting. That's when the stars appear. That's when the priests eat truma. And so it's the ending of the day when the stars appear that makes clean the man. It is not that the man becomes clean by the rising of the next day or the appearance of the sun the next day, as Stam 2 wants to assert. So based on this baraita, his position is not substantiated. We know that the sun setting is what makes the priest here clean in order that he can eat truma. The sign of the priest eating truma is when the stars appeared in the sky. And that means that the sun was setting, Uva ha-shemesh, the sun was setting, and we know that that is when the man is clean. The setting of the sun, the stars appearing, the preceding terumah, that's when he is clean. It is specifically the setting of the sun that leads to the man's cleanliness. Just restated again, the day, the setting of the sun, the appearance of the stars, those make clean the man. So that takes us to the end of this section here. And we have read through really an entire pretty good chunk here at the beginning of Mishnah Berakhot. So I hope that this was helpful, and we will continue on with more exciting rabbinic materials in the next video.